certain times, decision making used to be a process, a rational process, a structured, formal process. But in today's world, where the world is changing so fast, decision making looks like, we are aiming at the moving target. So by the time you have made a decision, the world might have changed completely, right? Be it in terms of global economy, be it in terms of policy changes or technological disruptions. We always are in the external environment where the things are changing very fast. And one thing which gets affected in this process is decision making, right? So decision making is not just a backdrop. It has now, it reflects in every part or every routine task that you do in your organization, right? So in this changing world, we are not aiming at now at the making the right decision. We are now looking at making a good decision which proves to be right in the changing times, right? So I would like to invite the panelists to share some thoughts on some of the decisions which you would have made recently where the external environment affected significantly, or maybe where you would have faced that the decision, the way you made this decision today was not the same way you were making it 5 years ago probably, right? So maybe we can start with your input, sir.
So see, I think the basics, if you ask me, of decision making remain the same. I mean, when you're making a decision, you will still follow a rational process. You will look at all the variables which will impact, which is external or internal. You will foresee what the future will look like. You will look at the trends. You'll have your own intelligence built into it. And then you will also identify the risks. What is it that can go wrong? So that remains the same. I think what has changed is the probability of change happening within next whatever strategic timeline you have is significantly higher. If you have 3 years that you are planning for, 1 year definitely you can take it from me that the things will go completely awry. It will not go as per plan. So what you need to do is, one is you need to plan for failure as well, I feel, right? Because things for some time will not go as per plan for an extended period maybe. Secondly, you need to modularize your plan, which means if in my example, we are currently building an application for clients for their portfolio reviews, etc. Now, the way we are building it is to modularize it, which means if there is a tool that changes or if there is something new that comes up, I should be able to swap that with something which is more contemporary, more real, or more relevant to what I am trying to do. So you modularize it, you plan for failure, and perhaps your planning itself will be now not one annual operating plan which is cast in stone. You will perhaps make it like a guidance, and then you will identify what are the parameters. If they change, then you will do a pivot. So if in our kind of business, if inflation goes up, or if oil prices go up, or interest rate go down, there is an impact, and perhaps that changes the asset classes. It changes the way the portfolios will perform. So that is what you have to be ready for, and that's the way, I mean, some of us are actually trying to cope in this situation where every Tuesday you will have a black swan event. So that's it.
I think decision making is obviously what you said is absolutely valid. How do you deal with the change in the process of decision making, which is also not fixed or rigid but very fluid? Just to give you now, we're talking about example, and from my personal example, let's say 7 years ago when I moved to UK. UK is supposed to be a mature market, right? Stable, like, business doesn't change too much, channels are the same. The only disruption with the market is, and I come from white goods industry, so basically my previous company was Bosch and Siemens Home Appliances. Market leader, everything very stable, profitable, okay? And at the time I landed there, COVID started, so lockdowns obviously. Brexit was on the anvil and was getting pushed every year to another year next year, but now it was very much part of the discussion. So COVID and Brexit together, for a few months the market closed down, right? And then obviously everybody found different ways of fulfillment. And then when the market opened, demand shot up because everybody was staying at home, right? So the market, which was growing 0 to 1% for the last 10 years, suddenly grew 10% and more than 10% in the years subsequent year immediately after COVID. So there was no way in which the production, manufacturing, and supply chain could cope with that kind of rising demand. And then supply shock happened immediately after that, where electronics and semiconductors became scarce. And suddenly there was a situation where we could only supply 25% of what the market demand was. And the more premium your product was, the more it had electronics in it, the more disruption obviously you faced because there were more shortages which you had to cope up with. Now, how do you deal with a situation like this, right? Because, and over the period of time, all this stability and all these things had resulted in our supply chain becoming very complicated. So if we are selling an oven to one channel, we were selling another oven with slightly different feature to another channel, just to keep the balance of profitability across both the channels. But as a result of which, you can imagine how many components and how many parts, how much complexity was being created at the back end, right? And then when this shortages happened, we were the most hit because of our huge complexity. And we had, we had, at that point in time, I remember we had 2,500 SKUs across all the product categories we were dealing in. So immediate understanding was this complexity is something which has to be killed, right? During times of uncertainty, you have to come to as simple approach as possible. It was a long learning. I mean, it took us a couple of years to really cut down. So in UK alone, we cut down our SKU list by almost 50%. So I've just come back from there, joined another company. Now we were dealing with 1,000 SKUs only. So from 2,500 to 1,000. Other countries also cut. So factories had to really then result. As a result of which it helped there. It also helped in our positioning of our products with the consumers. Because for them, if you go to an outlet and find 25 televisions in front of you or 35 washing machines in front of you, how do you select? But if you have simply a good, better, best, you know very clearly, okay, this is the one which I can buy if at this price. If I'm buying a better product, I get this extra. If I buy a best, then I get maybe automatic dosing, right? So you have all that. So at the end of the day, where I'm coming from is in scenario like this, while obviously you're going with scenarios and you're trying to pick the best, staying very close to the consumer and to the customer, and then making sure that whatever process you're following, whether it's front of the market or whether it's at the back end, the more you can cut down complexity, the more it results in dealing with the situation better. Because then at least you are able to understand what's going on across the value chain.
Yeah. So I think he made a couple of great points over here, right? One was on reducing complexity, and second was the decision making itself. Parameters have changed, like you were pointing out. You're having frequent changes, disruptions that are kind of coming through. And one of the things that I notice is, and I've been in consulting for about a couple of decades, then moved to digital transformations, worked across services, manufacturing. So, and currently I'm now with the GCC. So one of the big things that I think have changed is earlier I think we used to plan for efficiencies. Everything was around efficiency. Today it's about redundancy, right? Supply chain. Earlier it was all about saying that I want to get the lowest cost. This is the supply I will go with. Today it's about no. I need to make sure that supplies are constantly available. And in my industry, we see it all the time. We work with China and US, the geopolitics that's there. Yeah. You have chips that are just not coming in. That was the biggest sale that was happening in the market. Yeah. And suddenly it's being pulled out of the plug. You don't have an opportunity to even sell those over there. What do you do? How do you change? I think these are things where you need to kind of start looking, like he was rightly saying, looking at scenarios and kind of trying to model those and coming up with scenes over there. And also looking at saying that if I'm going to go this path, what is my playbook? When will I activate it? What are the signals that I read? Because some of the signals could just be noise. It's not really something that I need to kind of act on. I take a look at it, I watch, and then I kind of jump onto it. Even simple ones. So about 8 years ago, I was with a pharma major when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we were a very traditional organization, largely India focused, balanced from all the shocks that you were seeing. And suddenly you had APIs getting impacted because it was largely coming from China. And you didn't have those coming any longer for your pharma products to be made. what do you kind of do? How do you kind of play with it? So that's on the supply chain side. If you look at things with the currency fluctuations, which is one that is huge nowadays, given all the stuff that you see in inflationary pressures that are kind of coming through, I think that's a scenario again you need to model for, and you still need to answer to the market. You still need to kind of go with. And I think to me, the best one that you would look at when you're doing a decision making is staying close to your customer, seeing what the customers are really looking for, and making sure you have the pulse kind of coming through there. That's probably, to my mind, one of the best things that we have picked up, and learning how to pivot over there and coming up with what alternates could we provide given the constraints that you're operating with, and working through with that has been one of the big learnings that we picked up, rather than trying to look at it more from an internal focus, which is what we started with, saying we want to maximize our shareholder value, prices, the kind of profits you're making and so on, to saying let's pivot it back, let's go back to the basics, let's start from there, and then let's come back to saying what we are kind of looking at and what options could we really look at which could work.
How do you deal with the change? So that's again coming back to the same point. What tends to happen is when the disruptions are minor, your mind is trained to deal with it. When disruptions are massive, which you've never experienced in your life, then you tend to sometimes freeze, right? And that's exactly what you should not do. So again, going back to the same example, 25% supply only, right? And that information also comes rather late, because what tends to happen is in UK, we do not have any factories, no manufacturing. So we were basically getting all our products from factories in Europe, Turkey, China, etc. And those guys told us very late, that this is the shock you're going to get. So now imagine, UK is a big kitchen industry, right? And Christmas is a big event where everybody tries to upgrade and buy a new oven or a new kitchen, right? And oven is so much central to cooking, the turkey which has to be cooked, right, on the day of Christmas. If you fail there as a company and a brand, you get no chance of coming back, right? So in September, October, we realized that we are going to fail more than 100,000 households with the ovens and the entire kitchen suite which are ordered with us. So now the entire team was in a state of absolute shock. How do we deal with it, right? We had no alternatives to give. So the only decision which we could take was to say, how can we still keep our trust with our entire channel partners? Because they are the ones who are going to face the music, and then they're going to stop dealing with us subsequently. We said, okay, why don't we ask them, we facilitate that you go and, somehow procure a competitor's product, may not be the same spec, but at least there will be an oven inside that hole, right? You can imagine money was one thing. Second, giving away our market share, okay?
Serving on the platform.
Facilitating that. It took us 12 more months to get some of the space back, because imagine other companies who got in, they will simply not give up that space, right? But the channel partners really trusted us and felt that, this is a company which is going out of the way, never happened, and has done this. So yes, we took a huge hit in that year, but the fact that we were able to come back after 12 months when the supplies improved, and the channel partners gave us priority as soon as that cavity was sold off, they gave priority to us back again. Even though they might have taken a competitor's product, they said, okay, no, but Bosch has, acted in an absolute, partnership manner. So we had to respect that. So I think that is another, so you could remain inactive, you could simply do nothing, right? And if you break that trust between customer and supplier, then it's so much more difficult to bring that back.